Three water charge protesters were sentenced to 28 days in prison today in the High Court. However, those sentences were suspended, predicated on the various protesters abiding by certain conditions. Natasha Reid from Ireland International News Agency is with us. Natasha, what happened in court today?
Well, the three men were found to have breached a court order that had prevented them from going within 20 metres of water installation workstations, and prevented them also from interfering with the egress and access of the water vehicles to the sites. Now, Paul Moore of Mount Olive Grove in Kilbarrack, Damien O'Neill of Greenwood Park in Coolock, and Terence Sheridan of Kilbarran Park in Kilmore West were all found to be in contempt of court by a High Court judge today. The case had been taken by GMC Sierra Limited, which had a contract to install meters, and they'd already secured injunctions preventing a number of individuals from assaulting, intimidating or interfering with workers installing the meters. Then the company secured the orders after its lawyers told the High Court that its workers had been harassed and threatened while installing meters in areas in North Dublin. But GMC Sierra last week moved contempt of court proceedings against four protesters on the grounds that they allegedly breached the 20-metre order in Dublin 7 and Dublin 13 a couple of weeks ago. Now, GMC Sierra said the breaches of the orders had continued, and affidavits from people working for the company were read into the record. They said that they had been prevented from installing these meters because of the men breaching the orders.
And given that the men were found to have been in breach of previously existing court orders, were they required to give any assurance that they would abide by today's verdict?
Well, they hadn't been found to be in breach previously. Court orders had been brought against them that they should not do this in the future, and they were found to have breached these orders on the 11th and 12th of November at a couple of locations, and all three were found to have gone within the 20-metre exclusion zones, and they had not denied going within the zones, but said they had not done anything wrong. But the High Court judge said that this was hard to comprehend, that they still said that they had done nothing wrong. He was satisfied beyond a reasonable doubt that O'Neill had breached the order by going within the zone, and that the other two men had breached the order by going within the zone, but had also blocked work vehicles on Animo Terrace in Cabra. And he said if orders of the court were breached or ignored, it undermined the very fabric upon which our democratic society was built, and as such the authority of the courts had to be respected. He said the court couldn't simply stand idly by while those who defied its orders went free and those who sought its protection lost out. And he was satisfied that none of the respondents appeared to appreciate the potential gravity of the situation arising from their breaches. He said their overall approach, that they had done nothing wrong, was difficult to comprehend.
And briefly, Natasha, what was the reaction in court when the sentences were handed down?
Well, the reaction today was much more muted than it had been 2 days ago, when a much larger crowd had gathered in the courtroom for the actual hearing. But today, the only real reaction was when he said he had decided that the appropriate penalty was to commit each man to prison for 28 days. A woman shouted, "Shame on you," at the judge. But he hadn't finished. He then continued that he was going to suspend the sentences for 6 months, provided that they abide by the order in future. Now, there wasn't much reaction to this, and outside, the men's solicitor, Cahir O'Higgins, said that his client's intention was to continue to protest peacefully and respectfully.
That's Natasha Reid from Ireland International News Agency. 53102 if you want to get in touch. We're joined by Paul Murphy, Dublin South West TD from the Socialist Party, who of course is one of the driving forces behind some of the water protests, most notably the water protest at which the Taoiseach was trapped in her car for roughly a 2-hour period. Paul Murphy, do you believe it is right that the men received suspended jail sentences today?
I don't. They're not accused of breaking any criminal laws, but instead of breaking an injunction that was granted to Dennis O'Brien's company, GMC Sierra, which is quite draconian, saying that people have to stay away 20 metres away from water meter installation activity. Even, completely, entirely peaceful protesters cannot be near 20 metres. So I think it's a very draconian injunction in the first place. And then it's clear that the suspended sentence has been given to try to intimidate them from participating in protests for a period of 6 months, and presumably to send a message to others not to participate.
But it is your view that people should have the right to breach court orders?
It's my view that people not only should have the right to do so, but in this case should breach this injunction. I think actually the fact that the sentence was suspended indicates that the court and the state generally is extremely nervous about jailing people for protesting against water meters. I mean, they know if anyone is jailed on this issue, you'll have absolutely huge numbers of people on the streets. And so I think where these orders, these injunctions have been given to the likes of GMC Sierra, or if they're given to other water metering installers at a later stage, I think people are right to breach them. And I think they're an affront to the right to peaceful protest.
Do you not, as a member of the legislature, have some level of responsibility to ensure that people obey our judicial system?
My responsibility is to my constituents. I was elected because of my strong opposition to water charges. I think if you have court orders given that are designed to limit the right of people to effectively protest against water meters, I think it's correct for people to break those injunctions, and it's correct for public representatives to break those injunctions alongside other people. And this injunction can be made effectively a dead letter by people continuing to defy the injunction, as in reality has been happening, and showing that, leaving the court and the state with a choice of either people are jailed and there's a massive explosion of anger that could potentially bring the government down and will be seen, for example, on December 10th, or that they're forced to accept that they can't enforce their own injunction.
And can I ask, Paul, if somebody listening to this hears you say that and says, okay, yeah, well, I agree with his thinking and does what you say, and they end up being jailed, are you morally okay with that?
I am. I think everybody should make their own decisions in terms of what protests they engage in. And anybody I talk to, any meetings I speak at about water metering, I outline the possibilities and what people can do. And so people are comfortable with the choices that they make in terms of the kind of protests they engage in. But I think, what's happening here is that water meters are being imposed on communities who simply do not want them. And it's why you have huge numbers of people out protesting on the north side. In my own area now in Dublin South West this morning, water meters were stopped in Knockline. Yesterday they were stopped in Temple Oak. And I think it's correct for people to protest against water meters that they don't want. And they should refuse to be intimidated by injunctions like this given to companies like GMC Sierra.
Isn't this to some extent a bit like the definition of peaceful protest in relation to the issue with the Taoiseach in Jobstown? At what point does protest become civil disobedience, become criminality? Surely you cross that threshold when you're disobeying court orders.
But there's a distinction between breaking court orders and something not being peaceful. I mean, if I was standing with a placard within 20 metres of water metering going on the north side of Dublin, I would be breaking this injunction. But it is evidently peaceful. It's absolutely clear that is a peaceful protest. And I think that's the kind of civil disobedience that people are correct to engage in, and where you have a massive number, huge numbers of people doing it, as is happening on the north side at the moment, and it's spreading actually right across the country. It's happening in Cove, it's happening in Knockline, it's happening in Temple Oak. Then it becomes very difficult for the state to enforce that on behalf of Irish Water and Dennis O'Brien's GMC Sierra.
And to be clear, it is the type of action that you would be actively supporting.
Yes, absolutely. I would be happy to break such an injunction myself, and I think the injunction needs to be broken by people in order to show that, look, we're not going to be intimidated by court orders given out on behalf of those installing water meters on people who don't want water meters. I think that's clear, and it's the correct method of protest. I mean, the main thing I'd say is that people shouldn't be distracted or turned away in terms of any of these things, or intimidated from coming to the large protest on December the 10th at 1 o'clock at the Dáil.
Paul Murphy, thank you very much. That is Paul Murphy, the Dublin West Socialist Party TD. And coming up, we'll be talking more about water protests, because that has been an issue across the floor of the Dáil between the Sinn Féin leader and the Taoiseach. But first, here's the traffic with its reaction to Paul Murphy supporting the notion that people should breach court orders. As a member of the Dáil, Paul Murphy should be found in contempt of his responsibility to uphold the laws of this state and the independent judges who uphold the law. Another one says, so the Nazis were right to bring in their laws and the German people correct not to object. There is reason why people have a right to protest and object to unjust laws. 53102.